Thank you, Joyce. I apologize. I'm a little bit sick today just with a cold, so bear with me. I'm really pleased to be here with you all today to speak with you in honor of Martin Luther King Day 2024, which is coming up tomorrow. I had the privilege, moving this down, I had the privilege of being part of this community for the past 5 years as the executive director, as Joyce mentioned, of the Network for Social Justice. And MLK Day organizing is something I inherited as part of the network's very long history of work and community engagement in this town. It has become a treasured network tradition as part of our work advancing equity and inclusion in both Winchester and beyond it. I had a real challenge choosing a title for today's talk. I kept circling the same themes: universalism, mutual support, faith, and Dr. King's oft-cited favorite quote, "But let judgment run down as water and righteousness as a mighty stream." I kept coming back to the question that has often been part of my activist upbringing growing up: what do we owe each other? Or as Rev. Maeve Hammond of the First Congregational Church put it to me the other day, how do we go about answering the call of humanity? This is the question or phrase that has been the cornerstone of my identity and a guide for my social and political engagement throughout my life. I am Jewish, and I was raised in the tradition of conservative, sometimes called conservadox, conservative and Orthodox together, Judaism. My earliest awareness of inequity came in the late 1980s through my synagogue's Out of the Cold program, an initiative aimed at providing shelter to the city's unhoused on the coldest nights of the Toronto winter. The first opportunity to understand that not everyone had a warm home to go to, winter boots and coats to wear, or even could depend on a warm meal at the end of the day was startling to then an 8-year-old, completely out of sync with the reality I was growing up with in my upper middle class Jewish enclave of Midtown Toronto. An upbringing, I often note, is very much in line with the world that Winchester High School students that I work with are growing up in right now. This was exposure to poverty and its devastating impact on the individual, and came through the synagogue, and this was not accidental. Judaism, like Christianity and Islam and so many of the other faiths of the world, is intimately connected to charity and kindness to the stranger. This is what I want to share with you today: my own understanding of these concepts from my Jewish faith and how they connect us on this national holiday, MLK Day. My understanding of justice is deeply rooted in the Jewish concept I'm going to speak about today of Tikkun Olam. Literally translated as repair the world, the logic goes that this world is broken, so human beings must repair it. They must fix it by committing to social justice, political activism, or in the broadest sense, ethical behavior. This is a concept in Judaism that is over 2,000 years old. And I did a bit of research into its early origins. I'm really grateful to have found an article by Dr. Jonathan Krasner at Brandeis University, bits of which I'm going to share with you today. The concept of Tikkun Olam originally appeared in the prayer Aleinu, which dates to the 3rd century CE. Tikkun Olam appears in the verse, translated from Hebrew, which roughly reads, "Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when all the brokenness in our world is repaired by the work, Tikkun Olam, of our hands and our hearts, inspired by your words of Torah." Beginning in the 12th century CE, the phrase took on a messianic idea. Repairing the world will bring about the kingdom of heaven. It was the belief that at the end of time, the brokenness of the world would be replaced by a more godly world. The Messiah would join us. The concept was then resurrected in the 20th century, increasingly coming to be seen as synonymous with human agency. There were two major developments that underscore how this connection with human agency came about, and how the concept is used today more widely. The first was the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews by the Nazis. Some theologians argued that the Holocaust meant that the relationship between Jews and God needed to be repaired. But this time, rather than God being the dominant partner, humans were. Essentially, it was time for humans to take responsibility for rebuilding the world. The second evolution of the term, which connects to MLK specifically and largely brings us up to the present, was in the 1960s, when conservative and Reconstructionist Jews became interested in offering young idealists of the Jewish faith a lens through which to see their political and social activism. They were addressing issues including poverty, Vietnam, and especially racism. This began the rise of the universalist concept and a way of applying Tikkun Olam in a more broad and a more secular way. In fact, I believe Dr. King's mission and his struggle for civil rights was a critical moment which irrevocably marked the Jewish concept of Tikkun Olam in the modern era. Abraham Joshua Heschel was a Polish-American rabbi and one of the leading Jewish theologians and Jewish philosophers of the 20th century. Herschel actively participated in the civil rights movement and was a participant in the Third Selma March to Montgomery, accompanying Dr. King and John Lewis. Champions of Tikkun Olam as a universal concept of justice in this era of civil rights evoked Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel's statement in a letter that he wrote to Rev. Martin Luther King Jr. after the Civil Rights March to Selma. In 1965, he wrote, "Legs are not lips and walking is not kneeling, and yet our legs uttered songs. Even without words, our march was worship. I felt my legs were praying." Dr. King's own understanding of justice, as elucidated in his now famous letter from Birmingham jail, is in line with this Jewish concept of justice as well. In calling out negative peace, the absence of tension, as King underscored it, and espousing the need to reach for a positive peace, the presence of justice, Dr. King parallels the idea of rodef shalom, a seeker or pursuer of peace, an inherent concept in the Jewish Mishnah, the first major written collection of Jewish oral traditions that we now know as the Oral Torah. This concept of rodef shalom has been used in the Jewish faith to refer to those who pursue peace above all else. Today, the concept is understood as a need to heal the world through acts that extend beyond any patriarchal interest or ethnic religious groups. For Jewish activist and writer Leonard Fine, this work is akin to entering into partnership with God in completing the work of creation. Fine described Tikkun Olam as the ground where particularism and universalism meet. In bringing this back to MLK Day and Dr. King himself, I want to end by thinking about how this translates into social justice and the work being done every day by people in this community. In preparing this speech and speaking to very kind-hearted pastors and reverends across Winchester, they guided me to the Catholic concept of the 7 corporal works of mercy, and I was amazed by the complexity of the model that it provided in how we treat each other. Feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, shelter the homeless, visit the sick. Visit the prisoners, bury the dead, give alms to the poor. In this community alone, we see innumerable works that mirror the interconnected nature of these acts of service. From churches that have taken it upon themselves to provide sanctuary to those displaced and deemed illegal, to the efforts by so many individuals and faith communities to support the work of the Dwelling Place in Woburn to provide meals to all those in need, to the work of our own farmers market to provide fresh products through SNAP and the ongoing support of Anna's Fund, to the ongoing efforts of faith communities, students, and volunteer groups in this town to highlight the complex problems within our criminal justice system, efforts to collect safe protective gear for other communities during COVID, the network's own efforts to advance awareness of the needs for more affordable housing in Winchester, in so many other ways that we have been pursuers of peace, rodef shalom, by giving each other and to those around us in need. For the network, MLK Day is a day of service, designed every year to support an organization close to us, doing work to address these basic needs of humanity. Last year, we uplifted the work of the Malden Warming Center. an organization that serves those experiencing homelessness by providing safe shelter and warmth during the winter months. Recognizing each person's inherent dignity and their unique circumstances. The Warming Center welcomes people experiencing active substance abuse and offers comfort, hot drinks, and a warm meal. Last MLK Day, we collected supplies and raised money for the center. Everyone during the day was involved in this collection and packaging, so we held an intergenerational initiative which everyone could take part of. The previous 2 years, during the height of the pandemic, we worked with La Collaborativa, providing much-needed food supplies to our neighbors in Chelsea, one of the hardest hit communities by the pandemic. Traveling to deliver the supplies from Winchester to Chelsea, I was always shocked by the visible disparities between the two neighborhoods in terms of income, housing, and planning. For me, this really highlights one of the crucial lessons of the pandemic, relating to the social determinants of health, that where you live really has a deep impact on how well and how long you live. This year, we are moving even closer to home, calling in people by borrowing the slogan, "A day on, not a day off." We are thinking hyper-local, addressing the often hidden poverty in a community like ours. We are working with the Enka Pantry to help stock them up for the winter with necessities: underwear, warm hats and gloves, feminine products, breakfast supplies for hot morning meals, and more. With this ethos in mind, we are inviting everyone to join us tomorrow, Monday, January 15th, bringing in donated supplies to Winchester High School from 10 to 12 p.m. I've brought flyers that are available as well if you'd like to know more. Tomorrow, you'll find our community engaged in service, alongside a live address from speakers including Jamel Adams, DEI Director of Scituate Public Schools, and a children's engagement room featuring activities for parents and children by the anti-racist organization Story Starters. In closing, I want to end on a note of introspection. When the recently rebranded Network for Social Justice launched MLK Day as a day of service in 2019, I thought a lot about the connection between service and social and racial justice. I turned first to my favorite Dr. King quote. It really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one destiny affects us all indirectly. And once again, on this MLK Day of Service, we remind each other that service to others can be a radical act that transforms both those who are served and those who serve. Service is an act that unites us, one that highlights the universal thread that binds us through our very human needs and desires, and allows us to cut across difference, ethnic, racial, and religious, by recognizing each other's humanity. I invite you all to join us tomorrow for this radical show of service, a day crafted in the legend of Dr. King, and who once said, life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are we doing for others? Thank you again for inviting me to speak this morning.